This episode is brought to you by Firefly Books, and with you being a sports fan just like me, here's 2 suggestions for your next great sports read. If you love basketball, then you need to add Dave Zarum's book, NBA 75, The Definitive History. Uncover untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. From the league's humble beginnings to its modern glory, it is a courtside seat to 75 years of NBA history. And if you're a golf fanatic, then you gotta check out Matt Adams' book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget. I've used it as a reference in this podcast over the past year for lots of stories that I've done, and I can tell you from experiencing it, this is a great book. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. It's the closest you'll ever get to walking the fairways with the greatest to ever play the game. Grab your copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available from Firefly, wherever you get your books. This day in sports history. And welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. If you go to sportshistorynetwork.com, I guarantee you can find your next great podcast. There's also a lot of great info there as well. That's sportshistorynetwork.com. It's July 16th, and on this day in 1950, it was the World Cup final between Uruguay and Brazil. Now, in Brazil, this game is considered a national tragedy, and it became known as the Maracanazo, an example of hubris being humbled. So there are several reasons why this game is so well known. First, the crowd. Now, the official attendance for this final is listed at 173,850 people. The unofficial attendance is said to be closer to 200,000, with people finding a variety of ways to get inside Maracanazo Stadium in Rio de Janeiro that day. It is the largest attendance at a single sporting event in the history of sports. Secondly, Brazil had been the tournament favorite as the host, especially after the West and East German teams had still not been admitted by FIFA, and teams from beyond the Iron Curtain either refused to attempt to qualify or they dropped out after qualifying. Uruguay actually benefited from those late drops. They played only one game in the opening group stage, beating Bolivia 8-0 to advance. Now, this was the first World Cup that started with pool play, but different from how it's done now. Instead of advancing to a knockout stage, the final 4 teams actually played another group stage competition. So each team in the finals played 3 games, with a win counting 2 points, a draw counted for 1, with any tie in the table decided by goal differential. Uruguay drew 2-2 with Spain and beat Sweden 3-2 in their first 2 matches. Brazil had beaten Sweden 7-1, followed that up with a 5-1 win over Spain, and they needed only a draw in this match to win the World Cup. Now, based on the fact that they had destroyed their opponents, they were playing in front of their home crowd, well, Brazil was expected to wipe the field with the Uruguayans. Add to that, the last time that those teams had played, Brazil had won 5-1. So on the morning of the final, and emphasizing here that the game had yet to be played, a couple of Rio papers declared Brazil World Cup champions. In an even more cart before the horse chicken counting before their hatched moment, 22 gold medals, each with a different Brazilian player's name etched on it, were minted that morning. The mayor of Rio congratulated the Brazilian team in a pre-game speech, saying, "You players who in less than a few hours will be hailed as champions by millions of compatriots. You who have no rivals in the entire hemisphere. You who will overcome any other competitor. You who I already salute as victors." So, if you don't already know how this turns out, well, you can probably guess how it did. After a scoreless first half, Brazil's Friaçá scored the first goal to the absolute elation of the largely Brazilian crowd in the 47th minute. But Uruguay's captain Abdulio Varela screamed at the referee that the goal should not count. The goal scorer was offside. It was obvious. The referee did not understand the language, though. Varela insisted that an interpreter be brought in so he could understand. So a bilingual player was brought over to translate. Message delivered, the goal still counted. But here's the thing. The discussion took so long, the crowd had quieted down considerably. And one of the all-time great forwards in Brazilian soccer history, Ademir, who was the leading goal scorer during the 1950 World Cup, recalled this gamesmanship by the Uruguayans.
There was a huge outpouring of emotion by the supporters when Friasa scored the goal. There were screams and fireworks. But look, there was also a lot of gamesmanship from the Uruguayans. They never restarted the game quickly. That wasn't what we wanted. They always tried to do the opposite of what we wanted, and that's how they took the initiative.
Varela took the ball back to the center circle, looked at his teammates and screamed, "Now it's time to win." Juan Alberto Schiaffino tied the game at 1 in the 66th minute, and then Alcides Gigia stunned not only the Brazilians, but the entire crowd of 200,000 with a goal in the 79th minute. Uruguay led 2-1, but they had 11 minutes plus added time to kill. But the crowd became crickets. A chilling silence came over those gathered there that day. And when the final whistle blew, the stadium was filled with, quote, a disturbing and traumatic absolute silence. The result was stunning. A country 50 times larger and with a population 60 times greater, losing to its diminutive neighbor. Many pointed out Brazil was not emotionally prepared for such a loss, and it's not overstating it to say that the entire country went into a period of mourning that lasted not just days, but weeks. It came to be known as the Maracanazo and was, and still is to some, a national embarrassment. Speaking of embarrassing, how about this? On this day in 1990, Steve Lyons dropped his pants in an inadvertent Moon Man incident. The Chicago White Sox were on the road at Detroit, and Lyons decided to bunt his way to first.
There's the bunt. That could be trouble as Petrie. No, Stevie dives in and beats it. Good effort by Steve Lyons.
Tigers pitcher Dan Petrie thought he'd beat Lyons to the bag and it should have been an out. So as he's arguing with first base umpire Jim Evans, Lyons is dusting himself off, but he's listening intently to the conversation, and apparently a little too intently as he kept getting dirt off his pants. He unbuttoned, unzipped, and then dropped them before realizing he was semi-mooning the 14,000 people at the park that night, along with those watching on television.
They called me safe, but I was really out. And so Petrie and the umpire were arguing, and I got so in tune to the argument, I literally forgot where I was standing.
Now, in all fairness, he was wearing sliding shorts underneath his pants, so no skin or full moon was shown. But he did say that when he got back to the dugout a few minutes later, dollar bills started raining down, and he said he made about $17 from fans and some of his teammates, showing their appreciation. Embarrassing moments seem to be the theme for the day, so here's another one. On this day in 1983, a whiff may have cost Hale Irwin a major golf tournament win. It was the third round of the Open Championship played that year at Royal Birkdale. On the par 3 14th hole, Irwin hit a really nice putt for his birdie try, but left it hanging right on the lip. He thought he'd hit it perfectly, thought it was going to disappear in the hole for a 2. But it just sat there, not moving the extra quarter inch to drop. He used his allotted time to see if it would cascade into the cup, but it stubbornly stayed there. Irwin then casually walked up to the cup to tap it in, but it was a little bit too casual on his part. Like he'd done 1,000 times on thousands of golf courses around the world, Irwin waved at it with one hand, intending for the blade of the putter to hit the ball into the cup. But he missed it. Not just the putt, the entire ball. Now, there are some who may have tried to pass it off like they didn't mean to do that, but Irwin owned up to his carelessness and said he intended to hit the ball. His whiff counted for a stroke. So then he tapped it in with more than casual intent, and he had to write down a bogey 4 for the hole. Irwin finished the third round with a 1 over 72, 4 shots behind the leader, and then he shot a brilliant 67 in the final round the following day. But when defending champion Tom Watson rolled in his par putt on the 18th the following day to win the Open Championship again, he celebrated his one-shot win over Hale Irwin and Andy Bean. Irwin's whiff cost him a shot at a playoff for the Claret Jug. And one more that might fit into ESPN's not top 10 list. On this day in 1971, Steve Prefontaine won a 5,000-meter race, which in itself is not different from what he normally did. He won a lot of 5,000-meter races. He won 4 straight NCAA 5K championships. But it's how this race was won that is unique. So at this point, Pre is pretty well known. He's already been on the cover of Track and Field magazine and Sports Illustrated. He's between his junior and senior year at Oregon, and this was an early test for the '72 Olympics in Munich. Running on the track at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina on this day in a Pan-Africa-U.S. dual track meet, Pre was locked in a battle with Ethiopia's Miros Ifter. Prefontaine loved running out front. He did not like a slow pace, and at one point said no one will ever win a 5,000-meter race by running an easy first 2 miles. But with 2 laps to go, it was a 2-person race, Pre and Ifter. As the runners rounded the corner coming to the line for the final lap, Ifter took off, and he built a 100-meter lead. It was shocking to see, but as he crossed the line for the bell lap, and yes, the bell was ringing, Ifter slowed, and then he stopped in the first turn. Prefontaine sprinted around Ifter, who had a confused look on his face. Pre ran alone for the final lap, and he crossed the line for the win. Ifter, who could not understand English, thought the race had ended when he crossed the line. After a 15-minute consultation amongst officials, it was finally understood that Ifter had simply miscalculated and taken off in a sprint to the line, a lap too soon. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. On this day in 1941, Joe DiMaggio hit safely for the 56th consecutive game. So it's really not what happened on this day, but what happened on the 17th that was the bigger story, right? I mean, by this point, Joltin' Joe had made getting a hit in a game pretty routine. So how different was Game 56 in the string than Game 55 or Game 50? Well, consider that DiMaggio had the record 11 games before when he hit safely in his 46th straight game, passing Wee Willie Keeler. Heck, this wasn't even Joe's longest hitting streak. 8 years earlier, when he played with the San Francisco Seals in the Pacific Coast League, he'd hit safely in 61 games. He went 3 for 4 on this day, feasting on Cleveland's pitching, as did most of the Yankee hitters. New York beat the Indians 10-3. Now, the media boys kept asking if he was worried, to which he responded, "Worried? Why should I be worried? You only get worried when you're not hitting." Well, since May 15th, the Yankee Clipper had been consistently hitting the ball. When his streak started on that day, the Yankees were a game under 500. On this day, the last day of his hitting streak, the Yankees were 19 games above 500 and on top of the American League standings, 7 games in front of Boston. They'd won 16 of their last 17. Now, was all of this because DiMaggio hit safely in 56 games? No, not really, but having a guy you can always rely on to get on base sure does help with run production. Of course, what this day does represent is the final game of the streak, the number we will always remember, the seemingly unreachable number. Some have approached it, but all have fallen short. Pete Rose came the closest in 1978 when he hit safely in 44 games, coming up one shy of tying Keeler. So, the streak continued on this day, and I'll have more tomorrow about the day when Joe did not get ahead. And while we're on the topic of record setting, on this day in 2017, Roger Federer won his 8th Wimbledon men's singles title. Similar to DiMaggio when Federer got to the Wimbledon final, it would have been stranger if he did not win it. And just like DiMaggio's streak, Federer's 8th Wimbledon title would be the final one in the string. Facing 7-seed Marin Cilic from Croatia, this one was one of his easier Wimbledon triumphs. His first in 2003 was a straight setter, but 2 of those sets had gone to tiebreaks to beat Mark Philippoussis. His repeat in 2004 was a 4-set win against Andy Roddick, followed by a little bit easier time in 2005 at a rematch with Roddick. There was the first meeting with Rafael Nadal in 2006 that he won in 4 sets, and then he was pushed to the limit by Nadal in a classic 5-setter in 2007, and that one tied him with Bjorn Borg for consecutive Wimbledon men's singles wins at 5. The 2009 Wimbledon title was Federer's toughest of all and a classic 4-hour, 17-minute affair with Roddick that finally ended 16-14 in the 5th. His record-tying 7th Wimbledon singles title win in 2012, Federer, as popular a player as he was, had to battle the crowd who were favoring the Scot, Andy Murray. After losing the first set, Federer won the next 3 for his 7th title. When he did not win in the next 4 years, folks figured, well, that was probably going to be it. 7, it's a good lucky number. But Federer entered the 2017 Wimbledon on fire, racing through the draw as if a bucket of cooling water was on the other side. When he dispatched Cilic in straight sets 3-1 and 4, he became just the 2nd player in the Open era to blaze through the tournament without dropping a single set. His 8th Wimbledon title topped Pete Sampras's and William Renshaw's 7 Wimbledon men's titles. And of course, Novak Djokovic has since joined that group, but missed out on a chance to tie Federer in last year's Wimbledon final. For the record, Martina Navratilova holds the all-time record with 9 Wimbledon women's singles titles. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Next time you find yourself parked on the interstate in a seemingly unending traffic jam, think about how lucky you are not to have been involved in an 11-day traffic jam in China. In August of 2010, a construction project, coupled with too many cars on an already crowded highway outside of Beijing, caused a traffic clog of up to 60 miles in length. Villagers along the roadway took advantage of the situation by selling water and food to trapped motorists at highly elevated prices. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.